They pulled away, went silent. Maybe they said they needed space, or maybe they just disappeared altogether. And now you're stuck in the spiral. Will they come back? Should I reach out? Was it my fault? If you've been in a connection with someone avoidantly attached, you already know how painful and confusing this cycle can be. I'm Jim Rohn, and in this video I want to tell you something most people won't. Avoidants don't come back because you begged, proved your love, or gave them more space. They come back, if they do, because something in the dynamic shifts. Because you shift. You see, avoidantly attached people are wired to feel overwhelmed by closeness. When things start to feel emotionally intense or too real, they retreat. It's not because they don't care. It's because intimacy feels unsafe. And unfortunately, the more you chase, the more it confirms their fear that closeness equals pressure, that love means losing autonomy. So they back off. And you're left holding all the emotional weight. But here's the key. They don't come back when you chase. They come back when you stop. When your energy shifts from anxious pursuit to quiet self-possession. When your absence says more than any message could. When they realize the safety they felt in your presence is now gone. And it's their move to make. In this video, I'll walk you through what actually draws avoidance back, not as a strategy, but as a byproduct of choosing yourself. You'll learn the exact energy that changes the dynamic, how to emotionally detach without shutting down, and how to protect your peace, whether they come back or not. So if you're done wondering, over-functioning, or waiting for breadcrumbs, this is for you. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and let's have an honest conversation about healing, attraction, and boundaries that honor you first. Let's dive in. Here's what most people don't realize. Avoidants don't come back because you asked nicely, explained yourself, or showed them how much you care. They come back, if they do at all, because something in the dynamic shifts. And that shift starts with you. Not with a clever text or the perfect apology, but with a complete change in energy. You stop chasing, you stop waiting, you stop performing. Instead, you return to yourself, and that changes everything. To understand why this matters, we need to look at the psychology beneath avoidant behavior. People with avoidant attachment styles aren't cold-hearted. They're not incapable of love, but they've learned to associate intimacy with risk, not reward. For many of them, childhood was emotionally unpredictable. Maybe they had caregivers who were present physically but distant emotionally. Maybe they were shamed for crying, ignored when vulnerable, or praised only when they were independent and easy. Over time, they developed a powerful belief. Depending on others gets me hurt. If I need too much, I'll be rejected. So they shut down. They cope by staying self-contained and emotionally unavailable. Here's where it gets tricky. When you sense that distance and try to bridge the gap, texting more, explaining yourself, trying to clear the air, you think you're helping, but to them it feels like pressure. Their nervous system interprets your effort not as safety but as a threat to their autonomy. And when they feel that threat, they don't move toward you, they move away. Your chasing doesn't create closeness. It confirms their fear of being engulfed. I worked with a client named Elise who lived this out in real time. After her avoidant ex broke things off, she went into overdrive, writing long letters, trying to explain her intentions, even offering space while subtly hoping he'd respond. Nothing worked. He grew colder. Then one day she stopped, not out of resentment, but because she realized she was abandoning herself in the process. She deleted the texts she got quiet. She started living again. No more waiting, no more emotional bargaining. And what happened? A few weeks later, he reached out, not because she tried harder, but because she stopped trying at all. Her absence was louder than her words had ever been. The dynamic had changed, and for the first time, he had to feel the emotional space she used to fill. That's the core of it. Avoidants don't return to emotional intensity, they return to emotional stability. And when your energy shifts from anxious to anchored, from reactive to self-led, they either meet you there or they fall away. Either way, you win. Because the goal was never just to get them back. It was to stop losing you in the process. Let's get clear about what doesn't work, because if you're someone with an anxious attachment style, you've probably done these things thinking they would bring you closer. And I say this with compassion, not judgment, because I've seen this play out over and over again with people who genuinely love deeply. But here's the truth. When someone with an avoidant attachment pulls away and you respond with more emotional energy, more texts, more explanation, more reassurance, you're not building connection, you're reinforcing distance. Avoidants are wired to equate emotional closeness with loss of control. So when they withdraw and you chase, even from a place of love, their nervous system reads it as pressure. Over-texting them? That feels invasive. Over-explaining why the relationship matters? That feels like emotional overwhelm. And over-functioning, where you carry the entire relationship emotionally while they disengage, just confirms their belief that closeness is a burden. They don't see your effort as love, they see it as something they need to escape from. One of my clients, Melissa, tried this exact approach with her avoidant ex. She sensed him pulling away, and she responded by sending long, vulnerable messages. She told him how much she cared, how willing she was to work on things, how she understood his fears. But none of it brought him closer. In fact, it made him colder. Why? Because he wasn't ready to process intimacy, and her emotional energy, no matter how well-meaning, felt like pressure to him. Her effort didn't feel safe, it felt suffocating. Another trap? Taking their distance personally. When an avoidant withdraws, it's not always about something you did. But if you interpret it as rejection, you'll start bending, shrinking, and second-guessing yourself to avoid the disconnection. And that's where you start trying to prove your worth. You offer more love, more patience, more understanding, thinking that if you just love them right, they'll stay. But love doesn't work that way, especially not with avoidance. And finally, holding emotional space endlessly for someone who isn't showing up isn't noble. It's self-neglect. Emotional availability isn't just about waiting, it's about mutual presence. If you're doing all the emotional labor while they sit in silence, you're not in a relationship. You're in a one-sided emotional transaction. And that's not love, that's exhaustion. But let's shift now to what actually works. Because if chasing, pleading, or over-explaining only drives avoidance further away, what brings them closer? The answer isn't manipulation. It isn't silence with strings attached. It's something much deeper and more sustainable. Emotional detachment, not as a tactic to get them back, but as a realignment with your own self-worth. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop over-caring at the expense of yourself. It's not coldness, it's clarity. When you detach, you're no longer making someone else's emotional availability the measure of your own value. You stop asking, how can I get them to come back? And start asking, is this dynamic good for me? And from that place, you stop reacting, you start responding with calm, grounded energy. That's the shift avoidants feel whether they say it out loud or not. This is what allows your absence to speak. Not with bitterness, not with passive-aggressive silence, but with the quiet power of someone who's no longer holding space for someone who refuses to show up. Avoidants often expect the anxious partner to chase, so when you don't, it breaks the pattern. It forces them to feel the emptiness that was once filled by your energy. And that space is where they'll either realize what they had or continue avoiding what they're not ready to face. Either way, you're no longer carrying their half of the emotional work. And here's what's most important. During that space, you live your life fully. You don't pause your joy, your healing, or your progress in hopes they circle back. You raise your standards. You build a life so aligned with your truth that only someone who's ready, someone emotionally present and accountable, will fit into it. That's not punishment. That's self-respect. A client of mine, Aaron, did exactly this. After a year of cycling through highs and lows with an avoidant partner, he finally let go, not with anger, but with grace. He stopped trying to fix it. He poured that energy into his friendships, passions, and his own emotional healing. Months later, his ex reached out, but this time Aaron didn't rush in. He listened, he observed, and when he saw the same patterns, he chose not to reopen the door, because his life had grown too solid to make space for someone who still wasn't ready. That's what emotional maturity looks like. And if an avoidant does return, here's what you need to remember. Nostalgia is not enough. Missing you is not the same as being ready for you. They must come back with consistency, growth, and accountability. Not just longing, not just sweet words, real effort. Otherwise, it's just another loop in the cycle. So don't focus on whether they'll return. Focus on how you show up for yourself. Let your boundaries be loving, your presence be grounded, and your energy be sacred. That's what truly shifts the dynamic. That's what makes someone pause and say, wow. They're not waiting anymore, and that's when everything starts to change. One of the most emotionally draining dynamics in any relationship is the push-pull cycle between an anxious and avoidant partner. It feels like a game you didn't agree to play, but you keep finding yourself in it anyway. One moment there's closeness and warmth, and the next, distance, withdrawal, silence, and every time they pull away, your instinct is to pull harder, to close the gap, to chase the connection. But that instinct, while deeply human, actually feeds the cycle you're trying to escape. This is the pattern. The avoidant pulls back to regulate their discomfort with intimacy, and the anxious partner chases because that withdrawal triggers deep fears of abandonment. Then the avoidant feels smothered and retreats even more, and the anxious partner, feeling more disconnected, doubles down, texting, calling, overgiving, emotionally overextending. Round and round it goes. But here's the part that gets overlooked. Every time you abandon yourself to keep the connection alive, you reinforce the pattern. You teach them that you'll shrink your needs, soften your voice, and carry the emotional weight for both of you just to keep them close. I had a client named Lauren who was stuck in this exact loop. Her avoidant ex would pull away for days with no explanation, and every time he resurfaced, she welcomed him back without asking for accountability. Why? Because she feared that if she didn't, he'd disappear for good. But after several months of emotional highs and lows, she realized something profound. She was teaching him that her presence was guaranteed, regardless of how he showed up. That realization shifted everything. The next time he reappeared, she didn't jump in. She paused. She asked herself, does this reappearance come with change, or is it just comfort-seeking? And that's the trap we have to avoid, treating their return as proof of our worth. It's easy to romanticize their reappearance, to think they came back, they must love me, I must mean something to them. But let's be honest, not every return is a healthy one. Sometimes they come back because they miss the comfort, the care, the emotional safety you provided, without actually being ready to contribute to it. And if you let them back in without new standards, all that changes is the date on the calendar. The pattern stays the same. So the work isn't just in detaching, it's in breaking the emotional pattern that keeps you stuck. It's in no longer using their return as a form of emotional validation. It's in shifting the question from will they come back to will I let them in if they haven't grown? That's where your power lives. Because real intimacy, mutual, secure, grounded intimacy, doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It doesn't show up only when it's convenient. It doesn't test your worth through inconsistency. It meets you steadily. And you don't find that kind of love by chasing. You find it by standing still in your truth and letting what's not aligned fall away. Break the cycle. Choose your peace. And let their return, if it ever comes, be met with discernment, not desperation. Let's close with a message that truly matters, the one that brings all of this together with both strength and softness. You don't have to chase, convince, or perform for love. That's not how real connection is built. Real love doesn't require self-abandonment. It doesn't ask you to overfunction. It doesn't leave you waiting in silence, wondering if you're enough. In this video, we explored why avoidantly attached people rarely come back because of emotional chasing. We unpacked the psychology behind their retreat, how their behavior is often a reflex of fear, not rejection. We talked about what doesn't work, over-explaining, over-texting, holding space without limits, and we replaced it with what does work. Emotional detachment rooted in self-worth, clarity without pressure, space without resentment, and boundaries without blame. We also looked at the cycle you want to avoid, the anxious chaser and the avoidant distancer, and how your greatest power lies not in pulling someone closer, but in stepping back into yourself. That's where the dynamic truly shifts. That's where real transformation begins. And here's the part many forget. Not everyone who returns deserves a spot in your life again. The fact that someone comes back doesn't automatically mean they're ready to show up in a healthy way. Nostalgia isn't commitment. Longing isn't growth. The return only means something if it's accompanied by consistency, accountability, and a willingness to meet you where you've risen to, not where they left you. So if you've been stuck in an anxious avoidant dynamic, I want you to walk away from this video knowing this: your healing isn't about getting them back. It's about getting you back, your peace, your voice, your clarity. And from that space, you no longer attract chaos. You start drawing in the kind of connection that feels safe, reciprocal, and real. Thank you so much for watching. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Have you experienced this cycle before? What helped you finally step out of it? And if you're ready to go deeper into healing your attachment style, building unshakable self-worth, and creating relationships that don't cost you your peace, hit that subscribe button, tap the bell, and stay connected. I've got more tools, insights, and support coming your way. Remember, you don't need to chase anyone who is meant to walk beside you. The right person won't run from your truth, they'll rise to meet it.